You know a heart is tired when the alarm rings for fajr and the body feels like stone. But something inside still whispers, get up, speak to Allah before the world starts asking you to be fine. You sit on the edge of the bed in the dark, not because your life suddenly makes sense, but because the pain has become too heavy to carry horizontally. The house is quiet. No one knows that your pillow was wet. No one saw how many times you opened your phone, closed it, stared at the ceiling, and wondered why the same dua keeps leaving your mouth with no visible answer. Then morning comes, and you wash your face carefully, as if water can erase what the night witnessed. You smile at people who would not know what to do if they saw the whole truth. You reply to messages with simple words. You go to work, you study, you take care of others, you act normal while a private storm keeps moving under your ribs. And the most painful thought is not always, why am I suffering? Sometimes it is, does Allah see how hard I'm trying not to break? That question can frighten a believer because you know Allah is all-knowing, yet your emotions feel abandoned in a waiting room with no door opening. But the silence you feel is not proof that Allah is unaware. The delay you are living through is not evidence that your patience has disappeared into nothing. Some forms of mercy do not arrive like an announcement. They arrive as the strength to make wudu again. They arrive as restraint when your anger had every excuse to speak. They arrive as a strange calm in the middle of a situation that used to destroy you. Your saber is not wasted, even when nobody praises it, even when your own heart is too exhausted to call it beautiful. Allah knows what you're carrying before you find language for it, and He knows the parts you have never been able to explain without sounding ungrateful, dramatic, or weak. The dangerous misunderstanding begins when pain convinces you that if relief has not arrived, your dua has been ignored. You start measuring Allah's nearness by how quickly the situation changes. You watch someone else receive what you have begged for quietly, and a small ache rises inside you before you can stop it. They get the job, the marriage, the healing, the apology, the child, the peace, the chance, the new beginning. You are happy for them, or at least you try to be, but when you return home and close the door, the question comes again. What about me? This is where the soul becomes vulnerable, because Shaitan does not always attack through open rebellion. Sometimes he attacks through comparison that looks reasonable. He tells you that your tears mean less, your prayers are weaker, your waiting is foolish, and your hope is humiliating. He makes you interpret another person's blessing as your rejection. But Allah's giving to someone else is not a statement that He has forgotten you. Two believers can be loved by Allah and still be tested in completely different directions. One may be tested by receiving quickly and staying humble. Another may be tested by waiting long and staying hopeful. One may be tested through abundance, another through absence. The heart that has to congratulate others while swallowing its own sadness is not invisible to Allah. That moment when you smile sincerely while your chest tightens is a real act of worship if it keeps you away from envy and resentment. And if you have ever done that, if you have ever wished good for someone while privately asking Allah to help you with your own ache, then understand the weight of that sincerity. You can honor that quiet strength by liking this video, not as a performance, but as a small acknowledgement that this kind of hidden struggle deserves to be spoken about with mercy. Because some of the hardest battles are not fought in public disasters. They happen in ordinary rooms, between one believer and one thought that must be resisted before it becomes bitterness. There is a difference between sabr and pretending nothing hurts. Sabr is not smiling until your emotions disappear. It is not forcing yourself to be numb, nor is it denying that something is heavy. The Prophet Yaqub, peace be upon him, grieved so deeply for Yusuf that his sorrow affected his body, yet he did not take his complaint to people in a way that rebelled against Allah. He said his grief and sorrow were only to Allah. That is not emotional weakness. That is spiritual direction. It means the believer is allowed to hurt, but the pain is carried toward the one who can hold it without misunderstanding it. So, when you cry after everyone has gone to sleep, do not assume those tears are a failure of faith. Sometimes those tears are the only honest prayer you have left. Maybe your tongue says the same dua again because your heart cannot produce new sentences. Maybe you sit on the prayer mat after Isha, exhausted, whispering, Ya Allah, I do not know what to ask anymore, but you know. That is still a form of turning back. That is still a door. People may think strength looks like never collapsing, but sometimes strength looks like collapsing only before Allah, because you know He will not mock the shape of your brokenness. You may have had days when you almost answered someone harshly because they touched the wound without knowing it. You may have typed a message full of everything you wanted to say, then deleted it because you feared Allah more than you wanted to win. You may have sat in a gathering hearing careless advice from people who know only the surface of your life, and instead of exposing your whole pain for them to judge, you remained quiet and asked Allah to expand your chest. That silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is discipline. Sometimes it is the believer refusing to turn pain into damage. Allah sees that too. He sees not only what you endured, but what you prevented yourself from becoming while enduring it. But there is another false idea that must be broken gently. Not every hardship means you are being singled out as better than others. Being tested does not make a person spiritually superior. It makes them responsible for how they respond. A tired heart can start seeking comfort in the thought that everyone who hurt it is evil. Everyone who left is an enemy. Everyone who misunderstood is a sign of its special rank. That is not basira. That is pain trying to protect itself by becoming proud. Islamic maturity does not need paranoia to feel meaningful. Allah may be purifying you through a difficult person, but that does not mean you're allowed to dehumanize them. Allah may be protecting you from a path, but that does not mean everyone on that path is corrupt. Allah may delay something you love, but that does not automatically mean the world is conspiring against you. Sometimes people are limited, not malicious. Sometimes they disappoint you because they are carrying their own confusion. Sometimes a door closes because your own attachment to it was becoming unhealthy. Sometimes Allah teaches you through being misunderstood, and sometimes He teaches you through realizing you misunderstood someone else. This nuance matters because sabr is not only waiting for relief, it is waiting without poisoning the heart. It is being honest about harm without turning your life into a courtroom where you are always innocent and everyone else is always guilty. The believer asks Allah for justice, but also for humility. The believer seeks protection, but not obsession. The believer notices patterns, but does not worship suspicion. If Allah is guiding a tired heart, He will not guide it into cruelty and call that clarity. He will not require arrogance as proof of awakening. Real spiritual strength makes you more careful with your tongue, more sincere in your repentance, more aware of your own faults, and more dependent on Allah's mercy, not less. Sometimes the hidden mercy in delay is not that Allah is keeping you from a bad thing, but that He is changing the part of you that would not have survived the good thing correctly. There are blessings that can become burdens when the heart receives them too early. A person can be given love before they know how to stop begging to be valued. They can be given success before they know how to remain honest. They can be given influence before they know how to control their ego. They can be given comfort before they have learned how to remember Allah without being forced by pain. This does not mean suffering is automatically noble, and it does not mean you should romanticize exhaustion. It means delay can contain wisdom beyond your immediate reading of it. Think of the problem you once begged Allah to solve instantly, only to later realize that if it had ended on your schedule, you would have returned to the same weakness unchanged. Maybe the apology did not come when you wanted it, and in the waiting, you learned that your worth cannot depend on another person admitting what they did. Maybe the opportunity did not open, and in the months that followed, you developed discipline. You would have skipped if ease had arrived first. Maybe the relationship faded, and although it hurt, you slowly saw how much of yourself you were losing while calling it loyalty. Divine timing is not always visible as a dramatic rescue. Sometimes it is the quiet gap between your desperation and your decision. It is the space where Allah lets you see what you reach for when you are not in control. Do you reach for haram comfort, revenge, despair, numbness, or do you keep returning, even awkwardly, even imperfectly? The waiting reveals what the blessing might have hidden. And when you begin to notice that, you stop asking only, when will this end? You also begin asking, what is this exposing in me, and what is Allah inviting me to heal before the next door opens? The hardest nights are often the ones where nothing obviously changes. After prayer, you make dua with your hands raised, you lower them, and the same room remains around you. The debt is still there, the diagnosis is still there, the loneliness is still there, the uncertainty is still there. The person you miss has not returned. The answer you need has not arrived. To the outside eye, it looks like nothing happened. But a believer must learn to recognize the invisible movements of mercy. Perhaps nothing changed in the room, but something shifted in your chest. You did not panic the way you did last month. You did not send the message you knew would reopen the wound. You did not search for relief in a place that would cost you your dignity. You cried, but you still prayed. You felt fear, but you did not accuse Allah. You felt tired, but you did not abandon the obligations that keep your heart alive. These are not small things. A mountain does not always move outside you first. Sometimes Allah strengthens the feet that have to stand before it. Tawakkul is not pretending you have no concern. It is taking the next lawful step while admitting that the outcome belongs to Allah. It is applying for the job without worshipping the result. It is going to the appointment without deciding that the future is already ruined. It is speaking the truth respectfully without demanding that everyone understand you immediately. It is sleeping after dua, not because the problem is solved, but because your Lord has not changed. If you have seen even one old trigger lose its power over you, answer one honest question in the comments. What is something Allah helped you carry that you once thought would completely break you? Sometimes remembering a past mercy is the only way the heart finds enough courage to wait for the next one. There is a kind of basira that comes only after confusion has humbled you. Before it arrives, you may misread almost everything. You think the closed door is punishment. You think the long wait is neglect. You think your tiredness means you are failing. You think the absence of people means you have no support. Then, slowly, not all at once, Allah begins showing you details you could not see while you were desperate for a specific outcome. You remember a conversation and realize the warning was there. You look back at a delay and see how it kept you from making a rushed decision. You notice how a season of loneliness made you stop performing for approval. You recognize that the person who left exposed an attachment you had placed too close to the center of your heart. You understand that some comfort you wanted would have made you spiritually sleepy. This clarity does not always feel exciting. Sometimes it feels quiet and almost sad because you realize how much you were fighting for what Allah was gently loosening from your grip. Basira is not fortune-telling, and it is not imagining hidden meanings in every small inconvenience. It is a light Allah places in the heart that helps you respond with more truth. It makes you less reactive. It helps you distinguish between patience and passivity, between forgiveness and allowing harm to continue, between trusting Allah and refusing to take action. The tired believer needs this distinction. Sabr does not mean staying forever in a situation that is destroying your deen, your safety, or your sanity when lawful steps exist. Tawakkul does not mean refusing help, counseling, medical care, advice, planning, or boundaries. Sometimes, trusting Allah looks like leaving what is harmful. Sometimes, it looks like staying steady where leaving would be impulsive. The point is not to choose the most painful option and call it holiness. The point is to ask Allah for guidance until your next step is shaped more by obedience than fear. Many people will not understand the burden you carry because they only meet the version of you that survived enough to function. They see the finished sentence, not the trembling before it. They see you attending the family gathering, not the 2 hours it took to convince yourself to go. They see you working, studying, cooking, caring, responding, showing up, but they do not see how heavy your chest feels when you return to silence. Some may even say, "You seem fine," and you will not have the energy to explain that functioning is not the same as being fine. This is why the believer must stop seeking perfect recognition from creation. People can love you and still not know how to read your pain. They can care and still say the wrong thing. They can advise you from a distance and miss the private details that change everything. If you make human understanding the proof that your suffering is real, you will keep handing your wound to people who may not have the capacity to hold it. Allah, however, knows the whole context without needing you to organize it into a convincing story. He knows the fear behind your silence, the restraint behind your smile, the exhaustion behind your patience, the longing behind your dua. He knows when you are not asking for luxury, but simply for room to breathe. He knows when you are tired of being called strong, because strength has started to feel like a prison, and because he knows you do not have to turn every pain into public evidence. Some things can remain between you and Allah, not because they are meaningless, but because they are too sacred to be handled carelessly. This does not mean isolating yourself from sincere support. It means choosing wisely who gets access to your vulnerability. A heart in pain needs mercy, not an audience. Sometimes the safest sentence is said in sujood, where no one interrupts, no one compares, no one minimizes, and no one rushes you toward an emotion you have not reached yet. Still, patience has to be guarded, because silent suffering can harden if it is never brought under discipline. There are believers who wait, but while waiting, they stop caring about their prayer. There are believers who say they trust Allah, but they feed their despair every night with content, conversations, and memories that reopen the same wound. There are believers who are patient with people but cruel to themselves, replaying mistakes until repentance feels impossible. Sabr is not passive endurance without spiritual maintenance. It has habits, it has choices, it has private routines that keep the heart from collapsing inward. It may look like deleting the thread you keep reading because every reread pulls you away from peace. It may look like putting the phone across the room before sleep so your last act is dhikr instead of comparison. It may look like making a small dua even when you feel nothing, because worship is not only valid when emotions are soft. It may look like asking forgiveness for the resentment you do not want to carry anymore. It may look like going for a walk after ICR because your body has been holding grief your mouth cannot explain. It may look like telling one trustworthy person, "I am not okay," before isolation turns into a darker place. The believer is not asked to be made of stone. The believer is asked to keep returning to Allah with whatever remains. And sometimes that return is very simple. One prayer on time after weeks of heaviness, one honest tear, one avoided sin, one apology, one boundary, one morning where you decide not to let yesterday's pain dictate today's obedience. No angel descends in front of you to announce that this counted, but it counts. The record is more precise than people imagine. Allah is not only aware of the dramatic sacrifices, He knows the tiny acts of restraint that no one would even think to reward. Eventually, the heart begins to understand that relief is not only the arrival of what it requested. Sometimes relief is becoming the kind of person who no longer falls apart in the same way while waiting. Sometimes relief is the widening of the chest before the door opens. Sometimes relief is accepting that Allah's answer may come in a form you did not script. A dua can be answered by giving, by withholding, by replacing, by delaying, by protecting, by purifying, or by saving its reward in a realm where nothing is lost. That does not remove the ache of being human. You may still have nights where you cry. You may still feel a sting when someone else receives what you wanted. You may still ask Allah with urgency. because need is not shameful, but something inside becomes steadier. You stop treating delay as abandonment. You stop calling yourself forgotten because the visible outcome has not appeared. You stop assuming that silence from the world means silence from the Lord of the worlds. The tired heart, when guided by Allah, is not abandoned in despair. It is taught to wait without letting hope rot into bitterness. It is taught to pray without trying to control the exact shape of mercy. It is taught to trust that no tear falls outside knowledge, no dew arises without being heard, and no moment of patience disappears into emptiness. So keep carrying what you must carry today, but do not carry the lie that it is unseen. Wash your face, make the prayer, take the next lawful step, and leave the hidden accounting to the one whose mercy reached you before you knew how to ask for it. Your saber may be quiet on earth, but it is not quiet with Allah.